Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory.
We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. If you desire to integrate this learning practically and supportively into your life, then Soul-Driven Motherhood is your space to go deeper. Head on over to nourishingthemother.com.au or follow any of the links on our socials for Soul-Driven Motherhood.
We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we're so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast, we have a very special guest as part of our Body Love series. We have the beautiful Chloe Ann, who is an embodied leader, mother of two, and specialized personal trainer. So we'll be talking today about defying the bounce back postpartum body, which we hope will be a beautifully nourishing, restorative conversation for you and to give you some places to begin and to reconnect your body in a really loving way. So before we jump into that conversation, we'd love to remind you to scroll on down at nourishingthemother.com.au to the red banner, throw in your email address, and once every so often we send you a link with everything we've got going on in the world so that you don't miss a beat and can dive deeper where feels good for you. So nourishingthemother.com.au. So beautiful, Chloe. Would you just like to say hello before we introduce you more formally?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on. It's such an honour to be here.
We are so thrilled to have you here. So Chloe Ann is an embodied leader, mother of two, and qualified personal trainer. She is a feminine energy that runs wild and free, creating a ripple of love and change for women becoming mums for the first or 10th time. A beacon of there being another way to heal, recover, and become physically strong after birthing a child, Chloe is leading the way in body acceptance and healing through movement. She is more than just your ordinary personal trainer. Chloe is here to help women feel seen and heard in their motherhood, to show them that feeling great is more than body size or shape, and to go rogue on the whole fitness industry. Chloe shows up in all of her motherhood to inspire women to go deeper, more enriching experiences of the first 12 months of each of their child's lives, so they can continue to grow and evolve and crack open all the edges that society says is motherhood. Wow.
Oh my God, I am like all the feels from that bio. Are you too?
Yes, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just lit by reading your bio.
I know. How amazing is that? What a gift. Like even just hearing that, I imagine for our listeners, the same as it was for me, felt this relaxation in your body go, oh, like I just think that is what we get to listen to and where we get to meet our body and how we move in it and with it. So what a gift. Thank you, Chloe.
You're so welcome.
So I'd love to begin by, let's just talk about our title. So defying the bounce back postpartum body, because essentially what our culture esteems as the pristine version of post-motherhood is bounce back, get back, lose the baby weight, be like you were before. What do you think about that?
Oh my goodness. It's near on infuriating for me to hear people talk about it like that. I'm a personal trainer. My baby is 4 and a half months old, and my exercise regime looks woeful, and I'm so okay with that. There is no desire for me to be bang, 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 back into all the things. This is the structure, and no, you just created a human. Like, we absolutely do not need to be back in the gym or back doing hill sprints and crazy weights and stop. No. I've had conversations with women before where they say to me, or they, you know, are sharing on social media that they had their baby 6 weeks ago. They had their 6-week checkup with the doctor, which is, if you say that you're fine, the doctor's going to be like, yeah, you can exercise. They don't actually know whether you're physically capable of exercising unless you go and see a pelvic floor physio, so a specialist. They do an internal exam and actually like suss out whether you're actually capable of exercise, or like what kind of rehab you need to be able to get back to exercise. I think coming back to exercise after any kind of movement, walking included, requires some kind of rehab format. It's not an injury. We've just created a beautiful baby, but for our body, it's recovering like we've had an injury, essentially. It's a really blunt way to talk about birthing your child, but I mean, if you've had a C-section as well, it's major surgery. Like,
I love that we've opened with this, because for many women, they will have internalized the bounce back more than they've internalized your body has just grown a human. Your body has just rearranged its organs to grow that human. Your pelvic floor has just gone through the biggest stress potentially of your life. But none of that's part of our regular conversation. It's how quick can I be what I was before?
Right. Not to mention, on top of that, have you had an episiotomy? Have you had issues that have stretched and broken and you have restoration and healing to do there? Are there stitches? Have you had a cesarean section that's cut through every layer of your abdominal surface and an organ that you need to heal from? So could we just diverge a little bit into what does rehab look like for a C-section and for a vaginal birth, Chloe, in terms of what do women need to be tuning into? This is my checklist before I start going, now I'm ready to exercise. Are you able to sort of do what you would look for with your clients?
Yeah, definitely. So I've had both a C-section and a normal delivery. And for me, they were both very different. I didn't go back to exercise until about 6 months. It took me a really long time to get any kind of strength back.
Is it post your C-section?
Yeah, so post C-section, it took me a really long time to get any kind of strength back. And can we just, like, side note and add on that we're not getting very much sleep either.
Yeah.
Like,
and sleep is where we restore, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it razzles me so deeply. After a C-section, my biggest thing would be you don't need to rush to go out and be taking, you know, walks with the family and, you know, anything other than a flat walk. You know, 8 weeks after having a baby is, you know, more than enough. Like, your baby, like, if you've just had major surgery, that's only 8 weeks major surgery. That's not very long. If you'd just broken your leg and had surgery on your leg, you're not going to be going for a gentle walk 8 weeks post breaking your leg. And I think it needs to be looked at in a similar aspect.
In terms of reverence we give the recovery process.
It's lost that beautiful, I've just birthed this beautiful human into the world. I'm just going to sit and relax and let my body chill. But circling back, post-Caesar, I would be recommending that you take your time. Just enjoy being in your baby bubble. Like, there is no rush to get back to exercise. There's no rush to come back to this idea of bouncing back. We don't bounce back. Your body will actually literally never be the same, and that is the most magical gift that you could ask for. We don't want it to go back. It's not going to go back. And so culture talks about this bouncing back idea, and we have internalized that into being our responsibility to do something that we can't actually do. Our bodies aren't physically capable of doing that. And then, like I mentioned before, going and seeing that that physio and going and seeing a pelvic floor specialist is just, they can give you the advice that you need specific to you and specific to your single body, rather than a 6-week blanket doctor checkup that I'm quite sure that 95% of them look the same. And really taking the time in that postpartum, no matter what kind of birth you've had, taking the time to really tune into what your body's trying to tell you. I think that is really important too, because if something's not quite right, tuning into your body is going to make a big difference. I had to go back to hospital personally at 5 weeks postpartum because I was still really heavily bleeding. And if I wasn't tuning into my body and taking the time to listen back into that, I wouldn't have known that something was so wrong. And even if you've had a pretty straightforward natural birth, like I did second time around, I would still be saying the same thing. Like, you might be able to start gentle flat walks a little bit earlier, and, some gentle lightweight weight movements. But everything that you're doing in those early days is still gentle breathing, gentle stretching, super dialed back versions of your standard kind of exercises. So your squats and your deadlifts, and some core work. It's the very basic versions of those. And I think that they don't get pulled and stripped back down enough. I think that really gets missed. And that's something that I've done a lot of looking into, because that's the phase that I'm in too. I don't talk about this stuff from stuff that I have read necessarily. It's stuff that I'm working out and experiencing and doing as I go along, and working out what does and doesn't work, and talking to other experts in the industry and saying, how can we strip this back more? How can we make this feel better for women in that really fresh period? Because on top of trying to find your way with movement and exercise, society's cramming down these ideas that you have to do it differently and faster, and it has to look different to how it does. I think it's really important that everything just gets stripped back, whether you've had again, no matter what kind of birth you've had, it needs to be stripped down to those very basics, and it needs to be slow. I know I've said to Julie before that I've seen, people share on Instagram and other social media that they're back in the gym. I think it might have even been one particular person was 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks postpartum back in the gym. Oh my goodness, the gym is not where you need to be that early postpartum. It just, even if you're feeling good, your body's not there yet. Your internal structures aren't there yet. Even if you're feeling really good on the outside, it's just, I can't stress enough how much we need to take away that internalization of the bouncing back concept, and be no, I want to bounce forward. I want to move forward. My body is ready to create magic with the things that it's just done, rather than where it's been. So
that conversation, I mean, you really seem to embody it well, that sense that you're not going to bounce back. You're never going to go back to that body that you had before.
No.
But I imagine for some women, there's an enormous grief and perhaps rage or anger at that, and a crushing of a fantasy when they begin to see the truth of that for them. How do you guide women when they really struggle with that reality?
I think finding the gratitude in the little things is super important, the gratitude in holding your baby and holding the baby that you grew, and really structuring your thoughts to be around that. And I think on your thoughts itself, catching those thoughts of my body's now not good enough. I used to be so much prettier and thinner, and now I have all these stretch marks, and just picking them apart a little bit and just recognizing that they're there and sending them the love that they deserve, because it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to grieve that body. You don't need to attach that it's a bad thing to grieve that body. That body served you well at a certain point in time, and now the body that you have currently is serving you well. You're not going to have the same body all the time. Your body is forever changing. And I think society also sets you up that the body that you had when you were a teenager is the desirable body. For me personally now, the body that I desire is not the teenage body that I had. I desire a body that is strong and capable and helps me with my everyday life with my kids, and that I can build muscle on. For me, I love building muscle. That's something that really drives me. But I think just being kind and recognizing those thoughts, and also allowing the space to grieve the body that you feel that you've lost, even though it may not necessarily be a loss. I think creating some kind of ritual for yourself to grieve and honor all that your body did post whatever number baby you've just birthed into the world, and giving yourself full permission to feel that, and then just noticing the thoughts that you have moving on from that.
Just to bring us back to the exercising post-birth, do you have thoughts on what women can mentally self-check with, whether they're ready for exercise, what signs there are, okay, I'm ready to do more, move harder, go back to some type of more intensive training that feels really good for me, versus the checklist of these are the signs your body's not actually recovered and ready yet? Do you have like a clear sort of pathway that women can consider with both?
Yeah, so like a more personal one that you can kind of do in your own head. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So whether you're getting enough sleep is a major thing. On the days that I don't get, like on the nights that I don't get much sleep, the chances are I'm not going to be exercising or training or doing anything much the next day, probably not even a light walk, depending how good the night was before. So really taking into account whether you're sleeping or not. I think that's a major factor for really pushing yourself with exercise. What else is there? Taking into account that you need to start those movements slow and really steady, and very short workouts as well. They don't need to be long and extensive and lots of different exercise. Like keeping it really short and really simple, and really tuning into your body to any kind of niggles or something that feels a little bit off. I think tuning into those niggles and what really feels off is your best guide, your best bet. To start slow and then to just listen to those niggles would be my best kind of guide.
Are there signs in particular where you go, your body is not ready for that level of intensity?
Yeah, so for me, my stoppers have been any kind of internal abdomen, pelvic floor kind of feelings. Rather than, oh, that feels a bit twitchy in my arms or that kind of thing. So more of an internal deep belly kind of feeling, and tuning into that kind of area. If something's feeling, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit off. Tuning into that area in particular. Yeah, heavy, like something isn't where it's supposed to be. That off heavy feeling. I think that's the word I'm looking for, Bridgie.
So with speed, because you've mentioned that a few times, are you able to give us an indication on this postpartum idea, how much, how often, and how long that exercise looks like?
Yeah, so I would be doing 3 times a week maximum. And really you only need, if you're using your time wisely and picking your basic exercises rather than fluffy exercises, you really only need half an hour, 40 minutes, a couple of different exercises, and just sticking with your basics. Your basics will build your strength. So things like your squats, your deadlifts, your lunges, your push-ups, and your core work, and some rotation stuff too. I find that we're doing lots of twisting and picking kids up into car seats and that kind of thing. So that's really, really important too.
And how long would a workout look like? Like, how long is that workout for?
Yeah, so about 30 or 40 minutes.
30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm
And I mean, even if it's only 20 minutes, like, that's totally okay. It doesn't need to be anything that gets your body moving and starts bringing back those movement patterns is great. Like, it doesn't need to be overcomplicated or super long. It just needs to be something to get your body moving a little bit, start to build those patterns and that strength back, and just to clear your mind a little bit. Something that feels good for you.
What do you think women should be aware of or do with an abdominal separation?
That would be more one that I would direct towards your pelvic floor physio. They are your best bet for guiding you with the exercises that are specific for you and your body with where it's at with ab separation, because there's exercises that you can do to help reduce that, but they would definitely be your best bet for guiding that as opposed to a standard kind of PT. Yeah, I would be taking that advice from someone that's done an internal check with you.
And potentially push back if you know, if the PT is not recognizing that, I suppose, because I mean, I speak from experience. I've got an abdominal hernia from a separation, and it's very easy to think, oh, it feels okay like this. I guess I can do what everyone else is doing, and like try to control yourself into like leveling up and doing it, like, you know, come on, to then go, actually, no, this is a something with my body that I need to respect and manage appropriately.
Yes, absolutely. I could not wholeheartedly agree with that more. Even clients that haven't had babies in my group classes will say, this is feeling a bit twingy, this is feeling a bit funny, and they know my only rule is I don't mind what you're doing as long as you're moving. I don't mind what the exercise is. If that exercise is feeling a bit off for you, then move to a different one. Do something that doesn't feel off for you. Just because the other people are doing it doesn't mean that you need to. I think that's a really, really good point to bring up.
Should we be exercising before our abdomen has come back together properly?
Again, I would be going off the guidance of your physio. But you will need some of those exercises and those gentle exercises to help bring the ab separation back. So for me, and like, because that was still quite early on for me, and for most women, I would imagine, I was still doing those gentle muscle waking up kind of exercises. So I wasn't at the point of doing anything strenuous anyway. But I can't stress going to the pelvic floor specialist sooner rather than later, like in that kind of 6 to 12 week kind of range when your body's had a little bit of time to recover, but it's not so far down the track that you've created other patterns and habits, and you could have potentially, you know, gone back to some more vigorous exercise and pushed yourself back along the recovery train.
Yeah, totally. I really think that, because I actually think that was my journey too. I remember clearly after I'd had my first baby, and we had an independent midwife, and she was super old and wizened with birth, and she had, I assume, now I look at it in reflection, she had seen the part of me that was trying to bounce back, to get back. And I remember her clearly coming for a visit with me, and it was like messy. I wasn't sleeping. It was my first baby. I had no idea what I was doing. My mental health was at risk, and I kind of attached it all to how I could control my body. And that gave me a sense of strength. Yes, pseudo, but I can totally see what I was doing, but didn't see the kind of warped psychology in that and what type of support and nourishment actually a new mother needed. But she must have. Because I remember her very vividly sitting down in front of me and saying, if you try and work on your abdomen before your pelvic floor has come back up, it never will. And sometimes I wonder if that was the beginning of the weakening that has led to my now vaginal prolapse. It's food for thought.
Because did you train pretty hard then?
Oh, man. I trained like a fucking superhero with baby 1 and 2. I can remember vivid, like hardcore number 1, but mental health was so bad, it's still a little bit blotchy for me. But by baby number 2, and I'm fully co-sleeping, breastfeeding through the night. I have 18 months between my 2, so it's basically 2 babies, no support whatsoever, a husband who's working 7 to 7. And I remember what I needed to get through was structure. So I used to get up when he got up. I would have baby and toddler in the car. I would be at the foreshore front beach with my double pram by 7:30 in the morning, and I would be running that foreshore, pushing my 2 babies in the pram for an hour before I would stop and time it in time for her breastfeed, in order for then my son to have a play, breastfeed my baby, back in the car. And that was every single day.
I have so many points on that.
Good. This is why I'm saying it, right? Because that was me.
Yeah.
That was me.
And that sounds like, a coping strategy just as much as it was, trying to.
Totally. And I can even remember I wasn't even connected enough to my body then to realize the effect it was having even on my physical body, because there's that body dysmorphia going on. I'm still focusing on the other things. I can remember a couple of my friends going, "You are fading away. Like, you need to pull back." And I was like, no, I'm fucking not. I'm just like super powerful. But I think that's part of all of that psychology that goes so wrong without a support system and an awareness and a nourishing. This is the mother archetype that's missing in me, right? If I had a stronger inbuilt mother archetype, I would have been more nourishing. I would have moved with greater nourishment, but I didn't. I did not have a developed mother archetype, and I didn't have one outside of me. So all I was left with was a hardcore masculine, and that's what a hardcore masculine does. So
and that hardcore masculine is where that bounce back after baby comes from.
Right.
Which is, patriarchal motherhood, right?
Right. Exactly. This is my point. This is why I can see such beauty in having this conversation. So please feel free, Chloe, to pull apart essentially what I've just displayed as my experience, which I imagine is not an isolated one.
I can't imagine so. I cannot imagine so. Firstly, running. I will start with the disclaimer that I hate running. I hate cardio. I'm going to start with that. Like, I don't ever hide that. Even as someone that hates running, how old were your babies when you were running?
Oh, no, this was like Jade was 3 weeks old. So with
3 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
Julie.
With a 3-week baby and an 18-month-old baby. So again, my body has been not pregnant for like 9 months in between those two. And the rest of the time, my body has been growing or birthing. So across 18 months, I've only had a block in the middle where I didn't have a baby inside of me. And at the same time, I'm still breastfeeding and I'm still recovering and then getting pregnant again. So like, again, I don't think that this is an out of the ordinary experience, but this is what happens when we don't look after mothers.
Oh my goodness, 3 weeks. That makes me feel a little bit sick inside. I think I'd even be iffy about going back to running at like 6 months postpartum, never mind 3 weeks. Like, I still don't get on the trampoline with my toddler because I'm like, oh, do I really want to be bouncing like that yet? The impact of running and the up down and what it would be doing to a pelvic floor that is already so weak and trying to keep your insides inside. Is just, the running on its own is just makes me cringe hard, Jules, cringe hard.
No, this is why I think it's a super vulnerable conversation for me to have, but I think super important because I imagine, as Bridgie and I say all the time, half of our listeners are Bridgie-esque and half of our listeners are me-esque, which means half of our listeners will have a beautiful mother archetype like Bridgie because that's been a blueprint, and half of our mothers will have a completely absent mother archetype, which is me. And this is the result of that. This is the uncare of postpartum, because there is no blueprint that exists inside of you for care and nourishment of your physical body or the vulnerability and the healing. That is a feminine state of being in the body and the mind, which if you don't have that and you haven't developed it and you don't have a system outside of you that does, it doesn't exist within you. So tell me, Chloe, what you would have done with me if you had seen me there on that beach.
Whooped your ass, probably, with all the love.
What would that have looked like? What conversations would you have had with me?
It would have started with a giant hug that says you are absolutely enough just how you are in all your mess and magic right now. You don't need to be trying to be doing more and achieving more and, like, look at what you've already just achieved. Like, that's so beautiful even in itself. Like, give yourself that beautiful space and capacity to heal. Even with a small toddler, there is still, I know there's been conversations in my world about how I can pull in more support in an already quite supported space. How can I pull in more? Like, I'm grateful for that, but how can I have more? And building that support so that you can learn more and you can nourish your body and you can give it all the things that you need. But to that Julie that's running on the beach at 3 weeks postpartum with her two tiny babies, like, it's okay. Like, you don't need to bend to that masculine system. It's okay to sit in your messiness. Like, you are absolutely enough how you are. Like, it's making me feel all like,
yeah,
so fluttery on the inside.
What would you say to her about her body? Because I can see that hardcore exercise is also a result of, I have completely lost my identity, because there will be a huge part of me that was defined by, which again is very patriarchal, and the objectification and all of the ways in which we look through the male gaze at our own bodies. I can see that all of that is the blueprint for that. I've lost my identity. I'm unseen and invisible in this world because I'm now a full-time mother. And how I can get that back is to still be beautiful in the world, to still be appreciated and have an identity that feels intact for me based on how my body looks and is responded to. So the second you lose that, you're like, I've got nothing. Like, so I can see the psychology of how I was there.
Absolutely.
What would you, it'd be interested in knowing, what would you say to that woman who is working so hard on her body because it's the only facet of, she's trying to get back because it's the only facet of her identity that she has left. She has no other attachment to her body other than what it looks like.
And it's all that she can control as well. I mean,
I was going to say, you read my mind.
Cracking open of motherhood and, you know, realizing what you can't control with your babies. Well, you can control this vessel to a degree.
Right.
And often it's the body that, like, I mean, coming from a background with eating disorders, like, when the rest of life was out of control, I could control that. Like, that's a controllable variable. And for so many people, if not 99.98% of them, our bodies is the part that suffers because that's the bit that we can control. I, like, going through COVID, I hate to think how many bodies suffered because we couldn't control anything through COVID, but we had control of our bodies. It makes my heart bleed that there's no support and there's no learning and there's no systems for these women to plug into to be able to give them that nourishment and that knowledge. For me, I've been able to find other ways that I can not find myself again, but to relearn myself. I think it's a relearning rather than a finding yourself again or finding yourself in motherhood, whatever number it is, whatever number baby you're up to. I think it's a relearning.
How do you teach women how to relearn with a sense of love and nourishment when that is largely absent, and how they connect with their bodies through how it looks and through the punishment of, if it's hurt enough, it's done enough?
Yeah, so I think working through how do I get my thoughts out around this? I think the biggest way that I can help women connect back is giving them the permission that they need, that it doesn't have to be a bounce back and that it doesn't have to be done straight away. Like, you can take your time, and giving them the structures that they need for their movement to still be, like, for them to still be doing something in their movement, but to be doing it in a way that is part of that rehab process, and to be able to really check in and do so many of the things that you both talk about on the podcast and in your other learning platforms. Really, like, taking a look at those thoughts and just being kind to yourself. Like, I know for myself, a practice that I did, especially first baby, was after I would get out of the shower, I would stop and I would look in the mirror, which is really confronting after you've just had a baby butt naked in the mirror. It's really confronting. And I've had clients say to me, oh, I couldn't do that. Like, and I would say, you know, well, put on a layer of clothing and then try it. But looking at yourself in the mirror and really holding on to a part of your body that feels really challenging for you. Personally, it was my stomach, and I'm sure for so many other women, it's their stomach. And holding on to that part and just sending it some gratitude, sending it some love, telling my stomach why I'm grateful for it, that, you know, it's growing these babies, and noticing the stretch marks and the loose skin and whatever else might be present, the change of skin color, and really just thanking that and taking that in for how it is, but practicing that over and over again so that it goes from a point of feeling deeply confronting to just feeling so beautiful and natural. I'm now at the point with that practice that I can just send the thoughts where I need to. I don't need to necessarily be holding it. I don't necessarily need to be naked in the mirror. I can just be like, oh, I'm feeling a bit off about this area today. Like, how can I help it? How can I send it gratitude? But knowing as well that you can't, the concept of fake it till you make it isn't going to work, because your body is so much smarter than the fake it till you make it concept. I think that's great to a certain degree, but if you're just saying the words to say the words, your body will call bullshit. You're not going to start to feel better about your body. And knowing that this body and how you're looking right this second is not forever. It doesn't need to be forever. I look at myself in the mirror now, 4 months postpartum, and go, yeah, I'm really grateful for where I'm at, but I also know that this isn't going to be how it looks in another 6 months, and that's totally okay. It might be bigger, it might be smaller, it might have more cellulite, less cellulite, more, less stretch marks. I mean, I'm breastfeeding my second baby. They're going to look different again. My breasts are going to look different. And just being okay with that, knowing that our body is always moving, and showing it the acceptance and the love and the respect that it so deeply deserves, but knowing that that doesn't happen overnight. My body and I have been on a deep journey for many years now, and having kids makes it more worth it. It gives you a driver that you don't want to pass those beliefs on to our kids, because they mirror everything back to us. If I watch people around me that might hate taking photos because of how they might look in the photo, and their kids don't like it either. They reflect that view back to them, or, the words that we use to praise our children in their appearance. I think it's deeply important. And I mean, that in itself is a rabbit hole. But I think just being patient and being kind and gentle and having practices like looking in the mirror and holding a part and just sending it that deep love makes all the difference.
What is the difference between restorative and nourishing movement versus intense and punishing movement?
Your mindset. It's all in your mind. If you're doing that exercise because you're punishing yourself and you're pushing super hard and your ego's in play there too, especially the ego that I need to be back where I was, 6 months before I fell pregnant or whatever it might be. But doing the movement because it's a punishment or because you ate that thing is so detrimental for your health. So detrimental. Like, it's not even worth doing the exercise. Whereas if you're coming from a place of nourishment and love and care and soft strengthening, it looks like starting out slow and taking it really slow. So it looks like working on those breakdowns of the exercises rather than starting back up at, if you're breaking the exercise back down to a level 1, whereas pre-baby or, a level 3 or a 4, you can be kind and know that being at a level 1 is absolutely perfect, and being at that basic beginner, you wouldn't expect someone with that had a broken leg to go back straight away to doing, your full squat. Like, there'd be variations of that, whether they be using one of the exercise balls against a wall or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, the way that you're thinking about those exercises alone is the key difference, and how you go about executing them. I think that's the biggest thing, is whether you're punishing yourself or nourishing yourself with hard exercise that is a punishment. Like, is it a punishment, or is it because you want to feel good and it feels good for your body, not just you're doing it because you want to be doing the exercise and you're punishing your body for something you did or didn't do? Does that kind of answer your question? I think I circled around a little bit then.
No, I love that you brought it back to mindset, that it's not so much the activity, but more what is the mental state or chatter that you're bringing to that activity is what I think.
And like, even back on the mindset point, like, if you're happy with how your body is, it doesn't matter what society thinks it looks like. It literally doesn't matter. If you're, I dare say the words BMI because they infuriate me, but that is a term still like used by doctors. Like, if your doctor says that you're, my poor clients, they went and they saw their doctor, and one of them came back and said, yeah, the doctor said I was obese and that I need to lose 44 kilos. You what?
Yeah, can you talk to us about BMI? What are the problems with that as a scale?
So your BMI is your body mass index, and it just takes your height and your weight and spits out a number, and then the number then sits within a scale of, normal, underweight, normal, overweight, obese, like that kind of scale structure. But your weight number doesn't take into account any muscle mass. It doesn't take into account your menstrual cycle. It doesn't take into account whether you're breastfeeding. Like, it takes into account nothing. And it also doesn't take into account whether you're actually happy at the number that you're sitting at, if you even know what the number is. I've never known what my scale weight is. I've just gone off how I feel and how I appear to myself in the mirror, and how I appear to myself in the mirror based on my own thoughts rather than what society is putting onto women is ideal. But the BMI is a very, very inaccurate way for people to be put into a category, and for doctors to be able to use, or other medical professionals. I'm not singling out doctors here. But imagine being, Julie 3 weeks post baby number 2 and going to the doctor and they spitting out your BMI at you saying you're overweight. like, or that you're obese. Like, this client is definitely not obese. I think there is no issue with anybody's weight unless there is medical concern, like whether it's putting strain on your heart or your joints, whatever that might be.
I love this because I hate the BMI too, and as naturopath,
that's infuriating.
To take into account what actually is this holistic person's experience of physiology, rather than here's one standard and this is the standard that everybody should match. Because the patriarchy loves a narrow version of anything, a narrow version of bodies, a narrow version of sexuality, a narrow version of beauty. Pick what it is, they go, that is your ideal. Now everybody fit into that, and then there's all of this catastrophe that is created by the fact that we are diverse. And what we've lost is the ability to be with diversity as it exists in form, in human bodies. Because what if, someone is meant to be and experience, like if everybody's body is perfect for their mission and perfect for their body's physiology and function, then is the problem with that person not fitting into this one ideal, or is the problem with our society going, you're wrong? We've lost the ability to look at people's bodies in an inclusive way and go, okay, so what if that's that person's, like, what if that's it? Why can't we just love that as it is, rather than us going, oh, I have all these feelings about that and it shouldn't be like that, or it should, like, why do we do that? The problem is with us, if we have a problem with seeing that person wherever they are on that scale or just diverse experience of bodies, like we've lost the ability to love the diverse experience of bodies because we would rather exclude than include as a society in general. And that is continuously reinforced. And I have a huge problem with that also.
Yes, me too. Because no one's asked, well, this is your BMI. Can we just cut that out? We just get rid of the BMI altogether. Because if you're not educated in your own body and how you feel and all the things, that is a really vulnerable place to put women.
Yeah, it is.
Really vulnerable place to put women.
And it begins from birth because, even, with the fixation on a baby's weight.
Yes.
Or
the percentile.
Percentile.
I had that
how much of that is an expression of our body dysmorphia?
Totally.
That begins at birth.
Yes. I had that thought the other day too when I went and had my daughter and my son's maternal health nurse check up and went, is this just the child version of a BMI?
Oh, it is. I was about to say that it is. And the same thing with the nurse in school program. It's the same thing. Just so everyone knows, you can opt out of anything.
Yeah, I opt out of that.
I do not let my children go to a medical appointment where I'm not present or have chosen the professional. That's not what we're doing here in my little family. But I have had plenty of friends who come to me going, oh my God, they told my daughter that she's obese, rung me and told me now I have to have her on a program when this child.
Oh my God.
So that's the thing. They have a nurse come to the school.
Yeah.
Like, I obviously don't have school-age kids. So they have a nurse come to the school and do that health nurse checkup without their parents.
Without parents, yeah.
That's a terrible idea.
I can see that it's there to try to capture vulnerable children. I mean, there is some merit in the idea of it, but unfortunately, it comes out pretty warped sometimes, as we've just heard from Julie.
Yeah. And I mean, we're on this path obviously with Lola too, who is classified on the BMI scale as obese. And every time I go back to see the pediatrician, she pummels the shit out of this one point. And I look at her and go, yeah, I get it. But I'm a naturopath who is cooking everything in my home. I'm balancing every single meal that she has, including her lunchbox. I have gone and seen a nutritionist that I chose rather than the dietitian that was recommended by my pediatrician, because I wanted someone who had a very different outlook on what that looks like to have body conscious conversations around eating with children. I've got it underhand. I get it. But now this is her body. In Ayurveda, there's these different body types, and she's a Kapha body type. She has this delicious and beautiful, slow way of being in the world, and her body is a representation of that. So the problem is not with her. When she is looked at through, we need the kaphas in this world because they slow us down. We're not all pittas or vatas. They're the different types in Ayurveda. We need the kaphas because they're slow and they're soft and they have a different movement in this world. And therefore, the movement and the food that they eat, Chloe, would be different to the way that the body, who's a vata or a pitta, needs to be treated, right?
And I think you make a really good point around cultivating the professionals in your world, because there are so many health professionals out there, but just because they're the health professional that's there doesn't mean that they're the right one for you or that their view is necessarily suited for you.
No, or that it's the right one, totally.
Or if they're using the BMI, it's a little bit questionable.
Yeah, totally. I love the BMI conversation because it is still the main measure for which our society uses, certainly within a medical paradigm. So I love that we can have this conversation and say, you know what, there's things wider than that.
Can we get rid of the BMI and be like, how are you feeling in your body?
Yeah, right.
Where are you at?
Yeah.
What can we work on? What do you need?
I love
That's it. That's it. I could be done. I could die happy.
No, but I think that's what you're offering here is at every step of this way, what I've heard you bring it back to is, and how does that feel in your body? How is your body feeling? What does that feel like when you're doing it? Does it need to be changed? So it's always, I can hear what you're saying is we're bringing it back to connection, connect to your body, connect to your
Which you know is revolutionary for some people who have been raised and socialized to disconnect, to look outside of themselves and basically ask, am I okay? Is it okay?
Totally.
Which is, you know, from the maternal child health nurse onwards is where you're orienting to.
Yeah.
Maternal child health nurse, the school nurse, every other stage. Is this okay? Am I okay?
Totally. And on top of that, have I been acculturated into what my body feels is wrong or what I feel is wrong? And I've learned how to squash the feeling and just do the thing. Right? Which was me back then running. Wasn't okay to feel soft or vulnerable. Wasn't okay.
And I think there needs to be more spaces and places and communities that you can come and feel that vulnerable state and you can be that soft, gooey mess. I know that I show up to every learning container and everywhere else with kids hanging off me and like a messy house, a messy kitchen, like I'm happy to show up in that way so that other people know that it's okay to show up like that. I know pregnant, I shared a couple of workouts on my social media that I just did some really basic stuff. I was in my pajamas. It doesn't have to be anything other than how it is for you in that beautiful, messy, vulnerable state. It gets to look like that for you.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. So before we wrap up today, Chloe, is there anything that you would like to leave women with to consider when they are looking upon their own postpartum exercise and body movement?
Be kind, be gentle, and be slow. Seek out the learning and the places and the people that support that and support that soft, gooey center. Beautiful.
So what we do with all of our podcast interview guests is ask them a series of 3 quick-fire questions. Would you be comfortable if we moved into those?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'll ask question number 1, and then I'm going to pass on over to Bridgie. So question number 1 is, can you think of a time in your life where you've experienced a wound or a trauma or a challenge of some sort that you'd be willing to share today, where you can see you processed and moved through that and gained out of that huge challenge or just challenge some wisdom? So can you share a time with us where you have transformed a wound into wisdom? And are you able to share with us the wisdom that you have gleaned through that experience?
I actually had something written down for this, but now that I'm here, I actually have a completely different thought and feeling to answer that question with. So for many years before I had kids, I was bulimic, and I think that that was one of the most beautiful lessons that I could have possibly, and journeys I could have ever possibly have gone through. I think it created, as we touched on before about that control, it gave me that rock bottom to then start to find learning and help to be able to go deeper and to be able to find why I was trying to control my body and why I was trying to do the things that I was doing. But I was able to start the process of deeply connecting. It gave me that platform and that space to deeply connect and heal and to be more in touch with my body now than what I possibly could have imagined, and having to almost be forced to deeply connect with myself because that was the pathway to recovery. I think that there's so much gold in that experience, that I look back and I'm thankful for that journey, and I don't think many people would be able to be able to have that reflection on that kind of illness.
That's medicine. That's when it becomes medicine for others.
Yeah. And that's part of that experience for me. I'm glad that I had it so that it can be medicine for others.
And next question is books. If you could recommend a woman read any book in this world, what would it be?
It was actually recommended to me by Julie in one of my first kind of learning containers with Julie, was The Joyous Body by Pinkola Estes. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing her name right.
Yeah, that's Pinkola Estes.
Yes, because she talked about the concept that the sky was a mirror, I think, in one of her stories, and that the glass shattered and a little shard went into everybody, and tainted our views on how we view each other and how we view each other's bodies, and kind of put through that idea that, you know, that's not good enough, you're not good enough, your body looks like this, your body looks like that, but much more poetically. Much more poetically. But I think that book, The Joyous Body, is just absolutely divine, and there is so much medicine in that book and so much deep thought can come from that book.
It's so true. It's one of my favourites too. So thanks for allowing us to revisit that with you.
And if you could have a billboard on any superhighway, what would it say?
Someone else's opinion of you is a reflection of them and not you. That is one that goes through my mind all the time, taking that ego out of it and coming back to your own truth, that somebody else's opinion is theirs and not yours.
Beautiful.
That's really beautiful. So Chloe will be coming into soul-driven motherhood in this week to run a restorative and loving practice of what an exercise might look like postpartum. So if you're in soul-driven motherhood, you can look forward to that. And if you're not, get on in there. Soul-driven motherhood you can find out about at nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. But Chloe, we would love to know how to connect with you, how to find you, and what offerings we can connect for our own experience to move through with you.
Yeah, beautiful. I'd love that. I'd love to hear from anyone that really resonated with, or that wants to dive deeper into those concepts. So the best place to find me is on Instagram at Miss Chloe Ann. And I have a container that is being put together for that first postpartum period, as well as just doing some one-on-one stuff with women. I think that's really beautiful. I do small weights classes with women, but they're obviously a location-based situation. But yeah, that one-on-one stuff with women I think is really beautiful, and the container, the Becoming Mama project, to really facilitate women through that change and guide them through that slow, loving process.
And that's online, so...
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been an absolute honour to be here.
Oh, such a pleasure. I just think they're beautiful, nourishing, rich conversations for all women to have.
Yeah. Paradigm shifting. Thank you, Chloe. Now to connect with you, Julie,
is julietenner.love, and you, Bridget?
It's bridgetwood.life. Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family,
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
And if you're ready to ask, in what ways can I show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can I mine the wisdom from the experiences of my life and expand into those challenges? Then you're a soul-driven, heart-led mama who's ready for conversations and a community that supports her journey. Come join Soul-Driven Motherhood. We'd love to have you.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.